A kind waiter paid for an old woman's coffee, never knowing she was a billionaire looking for her future husband. "I am sorry, I did not bring my wallet. Could I pay next time?" Lucas looked up from behind the counter, taking in the voice, soft, apologetic, yet poised. The woman standing there was older, her silver hair neatly pulled back, her coat damp from the rain still falling steadily outside. She stood with quiet dignity, not begging, not flustered, just asking. He didn't hesitate. "It's all right, ma'am," he said, offering a gentle smile. "Today's coffee is on me." The woman blinked, clearly surprised. "I insist," Lucas added, already reaching for a cup. She opened her mouth to protest again, but stopped when she saw the sincerity in his eyes. She nodded once, quietly, and stepped aside as he poured the coffee. Lucas was used to hard days. At 26, he had learned how to balance exhaustion and necessity like twin weights on his shoulders. Law school part-time, 3 shifts a week at the cafe, and evenings tutoring high school kids. It was a grind that left him just enough to pay rent, keep the lights on, and buy his mother's heart medication. He had long since stopped expecting anything extra from life. The woman took her seat by the window, cupping the hot drink between her hands. Lucas added something quietly, almost as an afterthought, a small almond pastry wrapped in wax paper, placed beside her cup. No fanfare, no explanation. As the morning wore on, rain streaked the windows, painting the cafe in tones of gray and silver. Customers came and went, but the woman remained, watching the world through the glass with a calm stillness that seemed to belong to another time. Lucas stole glances when he could. She was elegant in a way he could not explain, not wealthy, at least not in appearance, but composed. Her shoes were worn but clean, her scarf plain but carefully folded. There was a kind of grace in how she sat, how she lifted the cup with both hands, as if honoring its warmth. When she finally stood to leave, she adjusted her coat and looked back at the counter. Their eyes met. She gave a small, deliberate nod, almost a bow, and then walked out into the rain. Lucas returned to wiping tables, but his mind lingered. He didn't know her name. He hadn't asked. He hadn't needed to. What he couldn't have known, what no one in the cafe that morning could have guessed, was that the woman he'd just served was Evelyn Harper, one of the wealthiest and most discreet philanthropists in the country, a woman with no children, no heirs, and no one to share the legacy she'd built over decades. For years, Evelyn had hidden from public life, refusing interviews, stepping away from her own empire. She'd grown tired of being seen as a bank account in pearls. So she disappeared into anonymity, not to be forgotten, but to observe, to search. She had been looking for someone. Not to love her in the romantic sense, she had long made peace with solitude, but to see her, to speak to her like she mattered, even when she offered nothing. And on a rainy morning, in a modest cafe, she found him. He had not hesitated, had not tried to impress, had not looked over his shoulder to see if anyone was watching. He had simply offered kindness, not because of who she was, but because of who he was. Evelyn stepped into her waiting car without a word, the pastry wrapped carefully in her coat pocket. The warmth of the cup had faded, but something else lingered, something she had not felt in years. Hope. And perhaps, if fate was kind, a reason to come back. Lucas never set out to live a life shaped by survival, but over the past 5 years, survival had quietly become routine. After his father died of a sudden stroke, Lucas, just 19, stepped into the role of provider. He put aside his dream of full-time university and began piecing together whatever jobs he could to care for his mother, whose heart condition worsened from grief, and his younger sister Mia, who had just started college with a partial scholarship. His days began with early lectures at the local college, where he studied law. Between classes and on short breaks, he caught up on reading. In the afternoons, he worked shifts at a small cafe. Evenings were spent tutoring students in math or literature, whichever subject offered better pay that week. By night, he delivered food across the city. Each day blurred into the next, stitched together by caffeine, exhaustion, and quiet resolve. Their apartment was modest, worn, but always clean. Lucas slept on the couch so Mia could have the bedroom to herself for studying. Their mother, Teresa, rested in the master room, her medication bottles lined up like little soldiers beside her lamp. Lucas never let them see him falter. He celebrated every A Mia brought home and smiled when Teresa managed a flight of stairs without stopping. These moments, small, ordinary victories, were the only wealth he counted. Love had long been filed away as a luxury. Lucas had met kind, interesting women, but the strain of his schedule always caught up. Canceled plans, late replies, falling asleep mid-call. Eventually, he stopped trying. Relationships, he believed, required security he could not offer, and emotional space he no longer had. Just 2 days after he had offered coffee to the woman in the cafe, another moment etched itself into him. That afternoon it was raining steadily. Lucas had just finished his shift when a man walked into the cafe. His coat was torn, his shoes taped at the soles. He didn't speak. He only stood near the door, scanning for an empty table, his hands raised in a silent gesture of peace. The manager noticed him immediately. "You need to leave," the manager snapped. "This isn't a shelter." The man didn't argue. He nodded once and turned toward the door, his face empty of emotion, like someone who had been turned away too many times to be surprised. Lucas watched it happen, his stomach tight from skipping lunch again. In his bag, he had one last sandwich meant to get him through the night. Without thinking, he followed the man outside. The man was crouched under an awning, trying to light a damp cigarette. Lucas approached. "Here," he said, holding out the sandwich. "Turkey and cheese, not fancy, but warm." The man blinked. "You sure, kid? You don't look like you've got extras." "I'll eat later," Lucas replied with a faint smile. "You look colder than I feel." The man took it like a gift. "People don't usually stop," he said. "You didn't have to, I know," Lucas said. "But I wanted to." As he walked back into the cafe, rain soaking into his hoodie, he heard the man call after him, "God bless you, son." Lucas didn't respond. He shook off the rain, clocked out, and left without a word. His stomach growled, but hunger was a familiar ache, one he could ignore. That night, after helping Mia with her coursework and checking on his mother, he sat by the window, sipping a cup of hot water. Outside, the rain tapped steadily against the glass. He thought of the woman with the forgotten wallet, the man in the rain. Two strangers, in need of something he had, nothing grand, just a little warmth. Lucas didn't see himself as noble. He wasn't searching for meaning. He simply believed that if you could help, you should. And maybe, just maybe, that would be enough. The next time Lucas saw her, she was no longer wearing a damp coat or modest shoes. She stepped into the cafe on a crisp evening, dressed in a tailored navy suit, her silver hair swept elegantly to one side. Her presence was quiet but commanding. And though her face remained familiar, there was something else now, an undeniable confidence, a subtle aura of control. Lucas was cleaning tables when she walked in. She approached him directly. "Lucas," she said gently, as if they were old acquaintances, "would you join me for dinner tonight? I promise the food will be better than the coffee here." He blinked, startled. I'm sorry?" "Dinner," she repeated. "Nothing strange, just conversation. My treat." Her eyes twinkled with a calm certainty that left little room for refusal. Against his better judgment, and perhaps driven by curiosity more than anything else, he agreed. The restaurant was unlike anything Lucas had ever stepped into. It was all polished glass and hushed lighting, with wine glasses taller than his palm and waiters who moved like dancers. Evelyn sat across from him at a private corner table, her demeanor poised and composed, like someone who had long been accustomed to power. After the initial pleasantries and a few sips of wine, she set her glass down and looked him directly in the eye. "I know you are wondering who I am," she said, "so let me start there. My name is Evelyn Harper. I come from old money, which means I learned young how dangerous it is to trust easily. I built my own fortune through quiet investments. I now own 4 companies, sit on the board of 2 hospitals, and have no heirs. And I am not here to impress you with any of that." Lucas stared at her, unsure how to respond. She continued, "I have spent a lifetime surrounded by people who only saw me as a wallet. No one has ever looked at me the way you did that morning. You saw someone struggling, and you helped, not because of who I was, but because of who you are." He shifted in his seat, uncomfortable with the praise. "Anyone would have done the same." "No," she said firmly. "Not any, certainly not most." Then came the pause, heavy and deliberate. "I want to propose something unusual," she said. "Marriage." Lucas nearly choked on his water. I beg your pardon." She smiled softly. "You heard me. I am offering to marry you, Lucas, not for love, not for romance, but for companionship, for legacy. I will pay off your debts, cover your mother's medical expenses, and support your sister's education, all legally documented. In return, you agree to become my husband in name. It will be a partnership, not a fairy tale. No obligations beyond respect and honesty." He stared at her in stunned silence. "Why me?" "Because you are kind, because you did not flinch when I had nothing to offer, and because I believe you are someone who will not lose himself in the shadow of another." Lucas stood abruptly, pushing his chair back. "This is insane. You do not even know me." "I know enough," she replied calmly, "and I am not asking for an answer now." He left the restaurant in a daze, the city lights blurring as thoughts spiraled in his mind. The idea felt absurd, unethical, almost offensive. Was she testing him, toying with him? When he got home that night, he found his mother on the couch, coughing violently into a handkerchief stained with red. Her prescription bottles sat half empty. Mia, wide-eyed, held her mother's hand tightly, her voice trembling. Lucas rushed over, helping them both into bed, calling the clinic, calculating in his head what he could afford. The answer was nothing. Later, sitting in the kitchen with the only light coming from the flickering stove, Lucas held the glass of water he had poured but forgotten to drink. His mind replayed Evelyn's offer, her calm voice, her eyes, filled not with manipulation but with something closer to weariness. He was tired too, of failing, of trying to stretch time, money, and hope like frayed threads. This was not a rescue fantasy. It was something stranger, an offer of alliance from someone who asked for no adoration, only trust. He stared at the glass, then at the pill bottles lined on the counter. He did not have an answer yet, but for the first time in a long while, he had a choice. Lucas said yes on a cold night, just after his mother collapsed from shortness of breath. The clinic prescribed medication, but the cost was more than he could manage. When the pharmacist hesitated over the insurance coverage, Lucas simply stood there, holding his mother's hand as she slept on the bench beside him. By the time he returned home with pills bought on credit and promises, the decision had already been made. It felt, in some quiet part of him, like surrendering something sacred. But the truth was simpler. It was survival. If marrying Evelyn meant his mother could breathe easy and his sister could stay in school, then it was a trade he was willing to make. The wedding was quiet, almost clinical. A private office downtown. No vows, no guests, just paperwork, a clerk with a flat voice, and 2 signatures. Lucas wore the suit Evelyn had sent, well-fitted but unfamiliar. She stood beside him in a cream blazer, her expression unreadable. Afterward, she looked at him and said, "You just helped me have a home again, a real one." There was no gloating in her voice, no trace of victory, only something gentle, an unexpected tenderness. He nodded, unsure what to say. That evening, they arrived at her estate. The mansion loomed behind wrought iron gates, ivy creeping up stone walls, light glowing through tall windows. Lucas stepped in with a single suitcase, feeling more like a guest than a husband. Evelyn showed him the house, library, dining hall, gardens. Outside a door with brass handles, she paused. "The West Room is yours," she said. "I don't expect anything beyond our agreement. You'll have space and peace." The room was warm, overlooking a pond. A shelf by the bed caught his eye, filled with rare law texts, some annotated in a careful hand. At dinner he mentioned them. "My husband was a lawyer," she said. "He loved the classics. I thought you might too." "He must have been brilliant," Lucas said. "He was," she replied softly. They ate quietly that night. It wasn't awkward, just simple. Two people seated at opposite ends of a long table, sharing food and silence. This became routine. Every evening at 7 they shared dinner. Evelyn asked about his studies. Lucas shared stories from class, legal theories, frustrations. In return, she spoke of places she'd traveled or offered anecdotes about her late husband. Always measured, always respectful. There was no intimacy, at least not in the traditional sense. No lingering touches, no terms of endearment, but there was curiosity, quiet care, occasionally a shared laugh. Lucas began to relax, not forgetting their unusual arrangement, but no longer fearing it. Evelyn gave him space, never prying, never interfering. In return, he fixed creaky doors, brewed her tea when she had migraines, and made sure fresh flowers appeared in the hallway each Sunday. He began to see her differently, not as a figure of wealth, but as someone who carried her own quiet grief and strength. One night, returning from the library, he found a note tucked under his door. Her neat handwriting read, "Try Chapter 4 of the Red Book." Henry said it made him fall in love with the law all over again. Lucas held the note in his hand, standing in the dim hallway. Something shifted in his chest. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was something rarer, something steadier. Recognition, respect. The beginning of something neither of them had known they needed. Over the next few months, something subtle yet profound began to shift between them. The silence that once filled the halls of Evelyn's estate no longer felt empty. It felt full of breath, of thought, of two people learning to exist alongside each other without performance or pressure. Lucas at first remained reserved, maintaining the respectful boundaries of their agreement. But as the days passed and the dinners turned into late-night teas, and the brief conversations turned into hours of shared stories, those walls slowly came down. One rainy afternoon, Evelyn invited him to join her in the solarium, a room filled with orchids, vines, and antique armchairs. The rain tapped softly against the glass ceiling as she spoke, her voice quieter than usual. "Henry and I used to sit here," she said, resting her hands in her lap, "before the accident." Lucas said nothing, letting her speak. "He died 12 years ago. Car crash, sudden. One phone call and he was gone." She looked out at the rain. "We had tried for years to have a child. Finally, I became pregnant at 41. I lost the baby at 6 months." Lucas sat still, heart aching at the calmness in her tone. She wasn't rehearsing this story. She was bleeding it gently, piece by piece. "After that," Evelyn continued, "I stopped feeling anything. I built businesses, bought properties, signed checks. I became a machine because it was the only way I knew how to survive. And then, one day, I realized I had everything and nothing at all." She turned to him then, eyes steady. "And then I met a young man who paid for my coffee without knowing who I was, who gave without asking, and I started to remember what it felt like to be seen again." Lucas looked at her, truly looked, and saw not a powerful woman cloaked in wealth, but someone deeply human, someone who had loved fiercely, lost painfully, and lived through more than most could bear. From that day on, his role began to change, not because of duty, but because of desire. He started making breakfast on weekends, even if she never asked. He learned which flowers she loved and began tending to her garden. He read aloud to her in the evenings when her headaches returned, choosing books from Henry's old collection. One morning she found a small potted lavender plant on her nightstand. A handwritten note rested beneath it. "For peace," it read. "The same kind you've given me." Their connection grew in the smallest ways, through the meals they cooked together, the late-night chess games, the way they would sit quietly near each other, not speaking, just existing side by side in the comfort of companionship. And then came the night that changed everything. It was late, Rain slashed against the windows, wind howling through the trees. Lucas had been studying in the library when he heard a noise, soft, strained breathing echoing faintly down the hall. He rushed toward Evelyn's room and found her slumped beside her bed, clutching her chest, eyes wide with panic. "I can't breathe," she gasped. Without hesitation, Lucas helped her onto the bed, threw on his sneakers, and sprinted out the door. He forgot his coat. He forgot his phone. He ran 3 blocks in the rain to the only all-night pharmacy he knew, banging on the door until they let him in. The pharmacist recognized him. He had been there for his mother once and handed him what he needed without waiting for the full payment. By the time he returned, soaked to the skin, breath ragged, Evelyn was sitting upright, weak but stable. He knelt beside her, pressing the inhaler into her hand, helping her breathe. When she could finally speak, she reached for his face with trembling fingers. "You're soaked," she whispered. "I didn't have time to grab a jacket." She stared at him, eyes brimming. "Why?" she asked. "Why would you run out like that for me?" Lucas looked at her, his voice steady. "Because I care." Tears spilled down her cheeks. She hadn't cried in years, not even at Henry's funeral. "I haven't been cared for like this," she said through the tears, "since the day my husband died." Lucas reached for a towel and gently wrapped it around her shoulders, not saying another word. He didn't need to. From that moment on, their bond took a new shape. They began walking together in the garden each evening. Sometimes they talked. Sometimes they simply held hands in silence, the scent of blooming roses wafting through the air. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in soft purples and oranges, Evelyn glanced at Lucas and smiled. "If I were 40 years younger," she said with a teasing glint in her eye, "I would have fallen hopelessly in love with you." Lucas chuckled, his thumb brushing gently against the back of her hand. "You say that like it's impossible now." She looked at him, touched his face gently, and said nothing. Because in her heart she knew that love had already arrived, not the reckless, fiery kind of youth, but a steady, healing kind born from understanding, kindness, and the courage to let someone see the most broken parts of you without fear. The headlines hit harder than Lucas expected. Waiter weds widow billionaire, love or ladder, from coffee to cash, a Cinderella story with a twist. Gold digger or good deed. Photos of their quiet courthouse wedding, meant to be private, had somehow surfaced. A grainy image of Lucas, looking nervous in his suit, standing beside Evelyn in cream silk, was now plastered across gossip blogs and trending hashtags. The internet, in its infinite cruelty, made a meal of it. Comments accused Lucas of manipulation, of marrying for money, of being a boy toy, a con artist, even a long con in human form. The age gap became a punchline. The power dynamic, a scandal. Lucas said nothing. He refused interviews, ignored emails, and deleted the social media accounts he barely used. Instead, he returned to his textbooks, buried himself in case law and legal ethics, clinging to the one part of himself the world could not twist into a tabloid headline. Evelyn, too, remained silent. She had been weathering storms of opinion for decades, but this one felt different. She had dragged him into it. And for the first time in many years, she found herself unsure of what to do. One evening they sat together on the terrace, the garden lights glowing softly around them. Lucas was quiet, his eyes tired but calm. Evelyn sipped her tea, the cup trembling slightly in her hand. "I never meant to cause this," she said. "I know. I thought I had prepared for every possibility, but I did not think they would go after you like this." Lucas shrugged. "I'm not the first person they've torn apart. I won't be the last." "You do not deserve this," she whispered. "If you want to walk away, I will understand. I will still help your mother, your sister. Nothing will change." Lucas turned to her slowly, his voice firmer than she had ever heard it. "You think I care what they say? I think you are trying very hard not to," she replied. He was silent for a long moment. Then, in a move that caught even him off guard, he reached over, and pulled her gently into his arms. She froze, breath held, unused to being embraced without hesitation or fear. Slowly she allowed herself to relax into it, resting her forehead against his shoulder. Lucas spoke softly into her hair. "If someone asks, I'll tell them I married you out of gratitude. Because I did." She looked up at him, searching his face. "But if they ask again," he continued, "I'll say I married you because I fell in love with someone who saw me when no one else did." Her eyes glistened, and her lips parted to speak, but no words came. Instead, Lucas leaned in and kissed her. It was not a dramatic kiss, not a grand, sweeping thing, stolen from movie screens. It was gentle, warm. A first kiss between two people who had crossed an ocean of pain, skepticism, and quiet hope to meet in the middle. When they pulled away, Evelyn was still holding his hand. "I didn't expect this," she whispered. "Neither did I," he said. They sat like that for a long time, listening to the wind rustle through the garden, the world beyond the gates humming with judgment, but in that moment, the noise faded, replaced by the steady beat of two hearts choosing each other. The next morning, Evelyn woke to find a new note at her breakfast place. It read, "I don't care if the world understands. I care that we do." She folded the note and tucked it into the pocket of her robe, her fingers lingering on the paper like it was made of silk. That day, for the first time in years, she canceled all her meetings. Not because of the press, not because of fear, but because something inside her had softened, not melted, but thawed, just enough to feel again. Lucas returned home from the library late that night to find dinner already prepared, his favorite, even though he had never said it aloud, just noticed. As they sat down, Evelyn raised a glass of wine. "To the rumor mill," she said dryly. Lucas grinned. "May it spin itself into oblivion," and they clinked glasses with laughter in their eyes and warmth in their chests. It was no longer a contract, it was a connection, one forged not in passion or fantasy, but in something far rarer, choice, deliberate, defiant, and deeply, deeply real. 1 year passed quietly, like pages turning in a weathered book. Through each season, soft spring rains, summer blossoms, autumn's golden leaves, Evelyn grew more fragile. Her steps slowed, her breath grew shorter. Lucas noticed how she leaned more on the railing, how she paused before standing. She never complained, but her body had begun to surrender. Still, every evening they shared dinner, sometimes in the parlor, other times in her bedroom when she was too weak to move. Lucas adapted without hesitation, bringing trays, adjusting pillows, learning to read her needs in silence. One afternoon, while she slept, her lawyer arrived. Evelyn had finalized her will. "She insisted everything go to you," the lawyer said gently, handing Lucas the envelope. "The estate, the investments, everything." Lucas sat still, the weight of it all settling in his lap. That evening he sat by her bed and took her hand. "I read the will," he said quietly. Evelyn looked at him, calm. "I can't accept it," he said. "Not all of it. The house, the wealth. I didn't earn this." "It's yours," she replied. "No," he said. "What we had, that was the gift. I want to live by my own hand, like you did." Evelyn gave him a faint smile. "You've already built more than you know." That night, as rain gently tapped the windows, Lucas helped her to the parlor where they often sat. He wrapped her in a blanket and sat beside her on the chaise. "Play the old one," she whispered. "The song from our second walk." He found the track and let the soft jazz fill the room, a slow saxophone tune, full of longing and memory. Evelyn rested her head on his shoulder. Her hand found his. Lucas said nothing. He just breathed beside her, their hearts quietly sinking to the rhythm of the song. Halfway through the second verse, he noticed her grip had loosened. He turned. She was gone. Her expression was peaceful. A slight smile touched her lips, as if she'd slipped into a dream she had long waited for. Lucas didn't cry, not at first. He held her hand until the final note faded, letting the silence, the music, and the weight of love wash over him. The next morning, While the house lay in stillness, Lucas found a letter on the small table beside her bed. Cream envelope, his name written neatly. He opened it slowly. "My dear Lucas, if you're reading this, I'm already gone. I'm sorry I didn't get to say goodbye, though I know you would have stayed until the last note played. Thank you for staying, for reminding me that life can begin again, even at its twilight. I didn't think I would ever feel love again, not the fiery kind, but the quieter one, the kind that sees you and stays. You made me laugh. You made me soft. You let me be cared for. You brought me home. If there's another life, if souls meet again, I hope I find you when I'm 25, in a jazz cafe, on a rainy night. Until then, live well, build bravely, and know this: you were the reason I lived again." With all the love I could never say aloud, Evelyn Lucas pressed the letter to his chest, tears finally falling, not from grief alone, but from the rare grace of having been deeply loved, and of having loved in return. Some goodbyes break us. Others stay with us, like music long after the song ends. This one, he knew, would echo forever. Months passed, but Evelyn's presence never truly left. Lucas declined the estate as he had promised. He kept only a modest portion, enough to cover his mother's medical care, Mia's education, and the seed money for something greater, something meaningful. He founded the Evelyn Harper Foundation, dedicated to supporting two groups Evelyn herself had once belonged to but never pitied: the elderly who lived alone, and young students without means but with dreams. It was not about giving handouts. It was about preserving dignity and offering the same quiet grace she had once given him. With the remainder of the estate, Lucas built a center, the Evelyn House, a final care hospice that did more than provide beds. It offered music, laughter, space to reflect, and most importantly, presence. A place for people to be seen, even at the end. The day of the center's opening was bright, unseasonably warm, and filled with people from every corner of the city. Volunteers, students, donors, and quiet onlookers who had once believed the scandal headlines and now came seeking something closer to the truth. Lucas stood at the podium, a simple gray suit on his shoulders, Evelyn's letter tucked safely in his coat pocket. He took a moment before speaking, letting the silence settle. "I used to think love had to be loud," he began, his voice steady. "I thought it had to burn like fire or flood you like a storm. I thought it was measured in grand gestures, passion, intensity." He paused, letting his gaze sweep across the faces before him. "But Evelyn, she taught me something different." His voice softened. "She showed me that love can also be quiet, that it can live in the space between words, in a warm cup of tea shared every evening, in a steady hand held through silence, in an embrace when the whole world calls your love impossible." A hush fell over the crowd. Some wept. Others closed their eyes, as if seeing someone from their own memory. "She didn't need to say she loved me," Lucas continued. "She lived it, every day, and now, through this center, through every life it touches, she will continue to love, long after I'm gone." He stepped back, applause rising not in celebration, but in reverence. Later, as the sun began to set and guests filtered out, Lucas walked quietly to the back garden, where a small stone monument stood beneath a flowering cherry tree. He ran his fingers gently across the engraved words. Evelyn Harper, a woman who dared to love, to give, and to live again. Lucas stood there for a long time, a soft breeze stirring the blossoms above. He did not cry. He smiled, because he understood now what it meant to love someone not by chance, but by choice, and to carry them forward not in grief, but in the life you live because they once loved you. We do not choose who we love, he thought, but we do choose how we love them, and Evelyn had taught him that love, at its truest, was not a blaze that consumed, but a steady light that endured. Thank you for joining us on this deeply moving journey. A story of quiet love, profound sacrifice, and the kind of kindness that changes lives in the most unexpected ways. Lucas and Evelyn's bond reminds us that love is not defined by age, wealth, or appearances, but by the courage to see someone fully and stay. If this story touched your heart, inspired you, or reminded you of the quiet power of compassion, we invite you to share it with someone you care about. And most importantly, do not forget to subscribe to Soul-Stirring Stories for more heartfelt tales just like this one. Stories that heal, stories that move you, and stories that remind us what it means to truly be human. We'll see you next time with another soul-stirring story. Until then, take care and never underestimate the ripple of a single kind act.